So the question is, so that's where we're going. So I want to step back a little bit now, but that's sort of the end game. Question is, let's look back to 2000. Okay? 2000 was a pretty defining moment, right? Obviously moving into a new century. We were seeing tremendous influence from where the internet was going. There was all this excitement about what we could do to connect with people. And we look at where we are in 2010, and have we really made progress? What has worked for us and what has not? And how much has changed, how much has accelerated in just the last few years? Because I think the game has changed once again. Social has definitely changed it, okay? And we'll get to some of the other things that have changed it. But I think by the time we get to 2015, if you think back, 2000, there was no iPod, right, in 2000? Was it? When did it come out? 99, so right around that time, okay? There was definitely not an iPhone. But you think about how much is different in your life today in just 10 years, and how much is different in just the last 5, and what we're going to see going forward. So let's look at some of the drivers in terms of what's behind this. Okay? I think a key piece of what's happening here is that we're dealing with a tremendous amount of complexity. And that complexity is rooted in uncertainty. There's a speed component to it because we're expected to respond faster, and we need to be able to switch gears more quickly than ever before. And look at what happened with this last downturn in terms of the talent decisions that were made. Right, and how widespread those were, and how many companies just sort of shredded, if you would, part of their talent base without really knowing. And there are stories in terms of a very large company, I won't say who or where, but they are in a pretty interesting technology sector, and they laid off a ton of contractors. What they didn't understand is it was those contractors that had the skills that they needed. Those contractors had the more progressive skills, and all of a sudden they're left with this employee base that they didn't really even understand. And so what does that look like? Another big technology company increased their workforce by 25% in a single quarter, only to the next year, start laying off again, only to the following year, start rising again. So for companies to be able to move that quickly, right, and to have a more sustainable approach to this, there has to be a more flexible solution to the workforce. Okay? Competition for skills. That is already heating up big time. If anybody is doing any type of recruiting for engineers, right, that's already taken off. It's very structural, but there are certainly pockets that are very, very hot. Technology. How companies are beginning to think about and use and apply technology for the way that people are connected for flows of information and knowledge sharing, that is starting to play a very big role as well, also in terms of how that is viewed externally. But the big one, what I think is really the big one here, is workforce preferences. And we have seen more change here in a very short period of time. It was sort of put on hiatus for a little bit, but it has come back in a big way. And I think that what we're finding is that people are reevaluating what's important. And what's important now is really more about a flexible lifestyle. And that's not just a generational thing, because I hear that from boomers, I hear it from Gen X, and I hear it from Gen Y. Okay? It's across the board. Because of this idea of mobility, I can be untethered and do something anywhere, anytime. Why do you care where I am and when I'm doing it if I get the work done? And that's why you have companies like Best Buy with their ROW initiative, results-only work environment, is so appealing. They now have 70%, and it could be more by now, of their corporate workforce on ROW. Okay? And there's a trust piece in there. Okay? But this recession has really caused people to rethink. We're now seeing, these startups that are just popping up like this again because, quite frankly, I think to a large degree, large organizations and maybe medium-sized organizations will have driven people out. Where's loyalty? Why, come on, why should I commit to you? What have you done for me lately? So how does that make someone feel? And hey, I'd rather take the risk, own the risk. I'm going to go off, do my own thing. Okay? And then we have, again, sort of, I'm going to say more of this boomer group, but again, it's not always generational, but this idea of moving in and out of the workforce. I want to do project work. I want to do something that's interesting. I want to do something with a company that I like to work with on projects I like to work with. That is ripe for how to rethink this idea of a contingent workforce. So you now have organizations that need, more flexibility, more agility in terms of how they manage their workforce. and you have a workforce that's looking for more flexibility. So in the past, when this has come up, it's really been more about the organization, right? In terms of wanting flexibility, and the workforce didn't benefit. They wanted health care benefits. Well, what's coming up? National health care, right? That is going to untether a lot of people from organizations that don't have to rely on that. Okay. What else did people want? They wanted stock options. Yeah, no, not so much anymore, because you're just not going to see that kind of return. So all of a sudden now, time again, right? We come back to time becomes more important, and how I want to spend my time, what I want to do becomes more important. The other big factor here, mostly because of social technologies, talent is a shared global resource. I am, an individual that has something to contribute, that wants to work on something. I have no limits. I can interact with people around the world and find something cool to work on and get together with people that want to do interesting things and do it. Some of you have heard me talk about InnoCentive before. If you haven't taken a look at it, take a look at it, innocentive.com. It's a site that brings together seekers and solvers. In this case, seekers are companies that have problems to be solved. Solvers are individuals. Well, this community of solvers has figured out how to self-organize. That, hey, if you and I work together on something, chances are we're going to solve this faster. And guess what? If we solve this faster, we get compensated for that. The other thing they figured out is that the majority of problems solved are solved outside of the immediate discipline of the problem. That does not resonate with HR. What does HR do? What are we trying to piece hiring managers with, right? Put the round peg in the round hole. So there's a lot of drivers here. This is from a new study, and I thought what was so interesting about this is it's talking about outperformers. And in this case, outperformers were companies that produced operating profit of 3 times other companies. Okay? So outperformers are developing capabilities that allow them to adjust and react more rapidly. Compared to their less adaptable peers, more than twice as many outperformers can easily identify individuals with the needed skills. Can we do that today? Easily, internally or externally. They can display and deliver information to meet the needs of various audiences, and they can quickly build skills to address changing conditions. Now, we're seeing that a little bit more with sort of the growth around learning and development and the investment in training. This is from IBM's New Way of Work study. It's free online if you want to access it. Good information. This is talking more, obviously, about the business. But if the business informs how we recruit, how do you translate that to a strategy around talent? And so as we think about this idea of creating organizational value when it comes to talent acquisition, this really comes back down to being able to build talent communities. And we've got to be able to build talent communities that align with the business need. So it starts with the workforce plan. The workforce plan is aligned to the business strategy. From there, you can break it down to the type of talent that you needed, right? What will be an employee? What may be a service provider? What may be a contingent worker? What may be what I'm going to call a temporary worker? Okay? And this is used a lot, for instance, in retail. In a retail business, you flex up by 30,000 people on average in a holiday season, depending on the size of your business, sometimes more, sometimes less. I heard some crazy number about Walmart. Don't remember what it is. But you keep a lot of those people on, and they come on sort of an on-call basis. They get the benefits as long as they continue to work a certain amount of time, right, in a given period. So let's say you work X number of days in a quarter. Why can't that work in other environments? Why, it doesn't matter. And that's a way to, where's Leanne? That's one way to deal with some of those legal issues around contingent employees, but it does mean that the employer has to think differently. The employer has to think, how do I engage these people in my business because I want to make sure they're available when I need them. So what does that mean for you? Because remember, potentially, if I'm correct, I may or may not be, but this becomes a much more competitive aspect of identifying and getting the talent that you need. So how do you build these talent communities? How do you create relevant and meaningful information that is shared on a regular basis to keep people engaged? Whether that be someone that you haven't really had a formal relationship with, someone that's done project work for you in the past, or an alumni, somebody that's maybe gone into retirement but doesn't fully want to retire. They want to be available to contribute and think about all that knowledge that they possess about the company. How do you get your business leaders engaged? The business leaders have cool stuff to share that will help address that first thing, right? Being relevant and meaningful. How do you take on these ideas of co-creation and business challenges so that you find cool stuff to put out there? You leverage this community to help solve problems, right? Remember, talent, solving problems, okay? And figure out a way to reward this group or whoever it is that helps you solve that problem. This is going to be multi-channel in terms of how you do it. There's obviously a variety of ways. I think Starbucks is a great example of some of the things that they've done with their My Starbucks, if you want to take a look at that. A lot of different ways you can do this. Multi-directional, we talked about that before. This is two-way. This isn't just throwing stuff out. This is truly engaging in conversations, letting people connect, giving feedback, seeing what they can do with this. And recognizing that this is an interdependent relationship. It's an interdependency between talent acquisition, the business, and the sort of mix of talent communities and what they're going to be able to do for you. So how do you begin to look at this, measure it, and deal with it? Several of you know I'm a big fan of CRM. This is actually a screen from Avature, and full disclosure, yes, I have done consulting work with Avature and continue to do so. But this allows you to begin to segment that talent and how you are going to then follow up with them. The point was made before, finance people don't really want the same information as marketing people. You can segment them. What you'll see on this graph here is this is showing a screenshot of this talent pool that is broken down by the type of talent and their availability. So now when I'm working with my business partners and they want to know, gee, I've got this project coming up, who are you going to be able to put on it? I know who I have in my talent community. And ideally, I have vetted these people. So I know that they're a fit for us. I know they have the skills that they need. I know that they're potentially going to be available and so forth. Okay? And what that can do in terms of being able to supply and resource the organization is significant. But there's this continuous loop here, right? So part of this is social continuity, but there's this continuous feedback loop that goes from understanding the workforce plan, the needs of the business, targeting the talent you need, finding that talent, segmenting them, re-engaging them through that relevant, meaningful communication, right? Deploying them against work, tracking where they are, continuing to re-engage and redeploy. Okay? So we just covered probably a 10-week bit of information in, 15, 20 minutes. So I'm going to leave it high level. I'm going to turn it over to Master to take you deeper into some cool stats that he's been working on. And I think we have the chance to come back later for Q&A.